Matt with the Old Medicine Farm. I want to thank everyone who tuned in last week. Got a lot of great feedback. Most of it was on various Facebook groups. So if you have anything to say about this video, I highly encourage you to make your comment here on the YouTube comments. That way anyone else watching can be a part of the conversation. Whereas when we have conversations going on a handful of different YouTube channels, not everyone gets to share the same information. But last week, I'm going to be honest, I did get claimed of being clickbaity with my title. And that may or may not be the case. It may have been intentional design to kind of generate some viewership. But I did get some feedback, especially from some people that I really admire working within the regenerative agriculture, permaculture space, saying that most of what I said was just words. And to actually show stuff and help people realize what the words I was talking about were. So today we're going to briefly talk a little bit about my context and how that is influencing this design here at the Old Medicine Farm. So when I talk about context, you could be very simple and just define your climate and kind of your resources. And that'd be what, most people do at a basic level. I prefer going the route of holistic management style context and defining your holistic context. I find it to be a really empowering tool to help define, and not necessarily define your life, but to help shape your life to be something that is really amazing and has a good impact on the land and the people around you. That said, if you just want to say what your basic context is, that'd be your climate and your resources. So for us, we're outside of Corvallis, Montana at 5,500 feet. We live up a fairly, it's not very long, it's only 5 miles, but it's a pretty strenuous dirt road. It's very hard on equipment, and we're off grid. So those factors in and of themselves have affected us a lot. We get about 12 inches of rain on average per year, precipitation, not rain. Most of that comes in the form of snow. And we're on a southwest through east, so southwest, south, southeast, and east facing hill that averages around 10 degrees slope. And that in and of itself can help shape a lot of your decisions. We went this step further and defined our holistic context, and that starts with defining your whole. So our whole would be my wife and I, her in-laws, or not her in-laws, that'd be my parents. My parents are both deceased. Her parents, my in-laws, and our beautiful daughter, Poppy, who's 3 years old. And a lot of our decisions are based on creating a life that is going to be the best life Poppy can have. So after you've defined your whole, you define your resource base. We owe the bank for 20 acres. Like I said, outside of Corvallis, Montana, 5,500 feet on a slope. One of our biggest resources is we do have a year-round spring, which is huge, and it's going to play a lot into our design. And other resources is there is land nearby that we could graze if we decided to start a cattle operation at some point. Limited funds do affect that decision. But we also have some amazing neighbors who do have some heavy machinery, which will allow us to do a lot of what we want to do. After you kind of go over those resources, you go over your financial resources, which we're very limited on. A couple big moves in the last year, and purchasing the house has left us, house poor, so to speak. After you've defined your resources based financially and land based, you're going to get into a quality of life statement. And I'm not going to glaze over this, but I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I haven't had the opportunity to approve sharing this with the internet with my wife and the whole of our group. But suffice it to say, at a minimum level, our quality of life is going to be based on having a harmonious relationship, ample time together on the land. That's how we want to raise Poppy. Closely related to your quality of life statement is what your future resource base will look like. I can say almost anyone watching this is going to say in the future they want to be financially secure, not have to worry about that. That's obviously part of my family's future resource base. But we also want abundant food and medicine, an abundance of game, We want an abundant aquatic landscape, not necessarily aquatic landscape, but we want to develop more water features. I forgot to mention when defining our land in the context that we are in a high risk fire area. The fire season in the Bitterroot Valley is kind of nationally famous, if not internationally famous. And so we want to develop more water catchment systems and make this a lusher kind of oasis place where even if there is a fire, maybe it's less severe just because there's more water. And we also have a resource base to protect ourselves and our house from the water. A big part of our future resource base, and where a lot of my energy is focused right now, is creating comfortable living environments for my in-laws and my family. That's crucial, and that's defining a lot of what I do, and putting a lot of the garden, so to speak, not necessarily on the back burner, but not a top priority. We also want abundant food and medicine, so that's a lot of what we're working towards when I have time away from creating the comfortable living situations, because my family's number one. I love them all to death. And so right now I'm focusing on that and spending time with them, and time out in this garden area is it's kind of my mental health time. So I mentioned within our context, we're in a very low precip area, and we're off grid. So even though I could drill a well, which I don't have the money, we don't necessarily have the ability to irrigate. We all know that you need some level of water to grow a crop. So that's where the terrace and swale system comes in, and the spring is such a huge resource. It's also kind of, we're designing in time here, and luckily I don't have to produce a huge harvest this year. I can focus on developing the landscape and doing the earthworks and letting the hydrological cycle get established and recharged. We'll be doing this across the whole 20 acres. Right now we're focusing on the 3/4 of the high production zone 1 garden. But if you're in a different context, and this is where our off-grid context comes into play, we don't have the power to generate a pump to irrigate, so we have to do it passively. I'm a huge fan of passive design, but if you really want to jumpstart a system and you're somewhere where you can plug in and you have the money for an irrigation system, you could get something established a lot quicker than we can. Along the lines of growing our own organic material, we've got everyone's quote-unquote favorite permaculture plant, Comfrey. It's definitely one of mine, and it's really nice that I am married to such a lovely herbalist who can utilize a lot of Comfrey, but we've probably planted way more than we'll ever need, but it's because it's such a fast biomass accumulator that when I was able to procure some cuttings and some root cuttings from a great friend of mine, thanks a lot, Tim, I just planted it all over the hillside. And at some point it might be more than we needed, but in the meantime it's a great way to get a lot of mulch. So again, we're out here today talking about context-based design. I'm walking this road that comes down along the pasture that we saw from the future medicinal food forest. This road is a easement that comes right through our property, which has some cons. A lot of our neighbors drive right by our house way faster than I would like. But one of the big pros is a road can be a huge water harvesting source. A lot of water comes down this road in the spring when the snow is melting, and a lot of it does sheet off into the pasture. So we will be putting in 4 swales on contour that catch that water and bring it out and irrigate the pasture. I'll also be able to tie in all the pocket ponds in the terrace system, so if I drain them all, it comes down into the swales and fills the swales up. That's going to add 2 benefits. It's going to allow us to obviously irrigate trees planted downhill of the swales, but it's also going to allow us to passively water our livestock. We don't have the money or the energy really, without investing in a new solar array, to put in another pump and all that would be needed to set up like automatic watering for the livestock. But we can passively water them, which is great. I'm going to do everything on contour. More sophisticated design might be utilizing Keyline Design, where some of the swales, and in true Keyline you don't use swales, but you could plant along those key lines. They're not necessarily all on contour, they're all equidistant, depending on your watershed, etc. And Keyline's fairly advanced, but you should check out Richard Perkins. I believe I can link a really good video right here, and he's doing amazing things with his Keyline Design. But for us, I'm never going to invest in a big tractor, harvest hay, or mow this. I'm going to leave that up to the livestock. So for me, I don't care if everything's equidistant. I can move my electric net fencing or my electric fencing in a way that allows me to, graze the grass and not the trees with relative ease. But if you're going to want to use heavy machinery, tractors for cultivation, hay, or alley cropping, I highly recommend a Keyline Design, and that keeps everything equidistant. That way you don't have weird spots that you miss with the tractor, or you have to waste extra fuel catching an extra 20 square feet in a corner of something, if that makes sense. So again, this week's video is all about just kind of showing some of my context-based design to get you thinking about your context-based design, because permaculture, regenerative agriculture, it shouldn't just be, oh, I saw someone else do this, I'm going to do the same thing. It should be, how can I utilize the concepts that this guy is using in my context? Thanks for joining. As I said at the start of the video, share what you're thinking with us. Let us know what you're thinking. I could be totally off base, maybe I'm on base. If anything resonates with you, let me know. Like, share, subscribe, and until next time, happy growing.